All right. I think that everything is working. Let's see if I can advance my slides. Okay. So as Jamie said, I am Nichole Huff. I am a faculty member in the School of Human Environmental Sciences in Cafe. And it has been so exciting to join you for the month of October for Productivity Mondays. And we've been working our way through an extension curriculum that I co-authored called Time Well Spent: Productivity Skills for Success. And today is probably my favorite of the lessons because it is the one that I put in practice so much, as I know many of you do, is work-life balance. And so we're going to be talking today about what that means. What does it mean? And is it really, is it a myth, work-life balance? And what does that mean? So I am glad to be joining you today. All right, so some objectives for our time together, to identify personal and professional self-care techniques. And self-care is one of those, it's one of the ways that we can protect ourselves emotionally and mentally and physically from burnout. And so we're going to be talking about what does burnout look like? What is it? And how can we buffer against that? We are going to look at how to prioritize roles and responsibilities effectively, and how can we, what are some things we can practice to help us prevent when feeling overwhelmed? So what do we do when we're sinking? Okay, so a quote that I love to start, as you know, each lesson has started with a quote, and this one is so true. So almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. So we are a very wired society. We are such a wired society, and even I'm coming to you on a webinar, right? And the past couple of years have intensified that. We are plugged in. I did remember to silence my watch and my phone and my computer to not be interrupted during this session. But we can get a hold of, somebody can get a hold of us at all times of the day. And what that can do is leave us feeling like we are never off the clock. When we're at work, home life can often ding, 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 ding. And the same thing when we're at home, if we're not careful, and we don't compartmentalize our time, we can have our work just really spill into our home life. And the pandemic made it easier for those lines to be blurred. And so if you are feeling that your balance is a little skewed at the moment, that's a little off kiltered, just encourage yourself to, encourage you to ask yourself if you've unplugged lately. When is the last time that you have unplugged from technology, your cell phone, your watch, from TV, from the internet, from screens that maybe distract your attention from real life? But don't unplug over the next 45 minutes, not until we talk about work-life balance. Okay, so as we begin, I wanted to ask you, and feel free if you have access to the chat, type in, but what are some of the current roles and responsibilities that you are juggling at the moment? So what are some of those competing responsibilities that you're juggling? Give people just a minute to start typing in the chat. Mother, employee, caretaker. Yeah, so that sandwich generation, right? Caring for those who cared for us, as well as children or those in our care. Mother, manager, supervisor, wife, daughter, volunteer, driving kids and cleaning. Yes. Oh, an 18-month-old. That's a big responsibility to juggle. Yes, and so like many of you, I'm the same. I am a mom of 3. What's for dinner, right? We have to, and tonight, candies for dinner, right? With Halloween. Like many of you, I am a working parent. I have 3 kids, and I have one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high school. And so we are bookends of busy all the time. And in the last 7 days, we have had 3 different viruses make its way through our house. The second of our kids are down with the stomach flu right now. And I'm hoping the other ones make it through the day without being called to come get them. And so it is, I feel like most days are just a different level of chaos. And I know that many of you can relate to that. So when I do this presentation in particular, I can relate because this is something that, is really near and dear to me because it's something I live each day. I want to be successful at work, but I also want to be there for my family. And I want to balance those roles and responsibilities that I have because we all wear different hats. Now, when we say work-life balance, we know that the scales are not balanced. So it is not like this, right? Like some days it's like this and some days it's like this. And so there are times where if I'm up against a deadline, if I am traveling for work, if I have something, a work fire that needs to be put out, where work may be elevated, where it is a priority sometimes if I have something that can't really be rescheduled. So sometimes that balance is weighted more towards the work side, but also because I am a human who is managing lots of things besides work, sometimes that life scale is weighted more heavily. And so, and it's all, that's okay. So when we say work-life balance, it doesn't mean that our scales are equal. It just means over time they balance out. And so if one end is higher than the other, it may cause us to feel extremely stressed. And when work spills over into life and life spills over into work, and then again, we never feel like we're unplugged. We feel like we're always on call for everybody. Makes it really hard to focus. And, research suggests that, that only about 15% of working adults are truly engaged on the job. And part of that is because of the competing demands for our time. And research also suggests that the more work-life balance and flexibility, on my walk into campus, I'm in Funkhauser for those of you on UK's campus. On my walk in, I passed one of the benches that has work-life sensitivity engraved on it. And now I appreciate that because it has been my experience that there is a sensitivity here to those roles that I balance. And so what research says is that the more balance, that more sensitivity that you have, that is the highest predictor of success on the job, more so than anything else, more so than degree. If you have an advanced degree, if you have experience, if you have supportive coworkers, all of that pales in comparison if you don't have work-life balance. So, having a better work-life balance can mean you stay with your company longer, you take less time for sick leave. We'll talk about vacation because we're not taking vacation either as a society. But the better your work-life balance, the less sick leave that you have, the healthier you tend to be. And we know the inverse of that is true. So not having a healthy balance in your life means that you are stressed, and that stress can lead to it can manifest itself physically, emotionally, things like insomnia, anxiety, depression. It can come when we don't have a healthy balance. And that leads to burnout. And so, burnout is can be defined as chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And now we know that toxicity in the workplace, that can be a source of stress. And sometimes that is out of our control. But there are a lot of things that are in our control. And that's what we'll talk about today. What are some of those coping mechanisms, those strategies that you can employ to practice better self-care, both personally and professionally, so that you can kind of have a buffer against this chronic workplace stress. And the World Health Organization, they say there are 3 signs of burnout: energy depletion and exhaustion, negative feelings towards the job, and reduced professional productivity. And so if any of these are something that you're currently seeing pop up on your radar, I'd encourage you to maybe employ some of the things that we'll talk about during this session on how you can hopefully, before a big fire looms, go ahead and nip that flame in the bud. So I'm going to talk about ways to do this and ways that self-care can, again, be a buffer against stress. All right, so the first is personal self-care. There are many things that you can do. Some of them we've talked about all throughout the last month, and they are here. So just again, in the chat, I'd like to know, what is one thing you do just for you? What is one way you practice self-care? And then we'll talk about what each of these are, but what is one way your top way that you practice self-care, something you do just for you? Running. Yeah, exercise. Acupuncture. Meditation. Physical therapy. Netflix in bed or Hulu, right? Just that downtime, that mindless activity, which can be really good. Yeah. And so knowing ways, reading's a good one. So knowing ways that help you unwind is important. It's important that you can identify a few things, yes, going somewhere at the salon without the kids, that you can identify ways to take care of you when you do feel like you're sinking. And this is both at home and on the job. And we'll talk about some professional self-care techniques too in the next slide. But I want to go through these, starting with engage your senses. And so, we have talked in lesson 2, and if you missed any one of the sessions, reach out to Jamie or Azetta, ask for all of the slides and all of the handouts, the publications. But we talked about how important engaging your senses can be for your productivity. Well, it's also true for your relaxation. And so when we maybe take a warm bath or a shower, that can relax us. When we, if we have a pet that we cuddle with, or a child that we cuddle with, or a spouse, anybody, we cuddle with anybody. But that can help release those endorphins. When we gauge our senses, and we can maybe getting out into nature. So some of you mentioned running. So think of your senses and think of ways that you can relax yourself, lighting a candle, making sure your environment is clean. And, because as I've said before, a cluttered environment can often mean a cluttered mind. And usually when my house is really cluttered, it is a sign that my life is really, really chaotic. And so engaging my senses can help me practice self-care. All right, so cultivating creativity is the next one. So there's a lot of research that goes into crafting and hobbies, and how when we can engage our creative side, it can help us unwind. And so maybe that is coloring. There's something to be said about those adult coloring books. Maybe you knit or craft or do woodworking, or that you garden. But do you have a creative outlet? And so maybe that is engaging in something like television, right? And so there is research. I like to remind my husband of this. There is research that supports that watching a good movie, a romantic chick flick, if you will, that it can allow you a mental escape. And so television, whatever your genre of preference, if it is not the Christmas movies that have now flooded Hallmark and the Like channel, but if you have another, outlet that can help you just embrace your creative side, and all types of art are part of that. Music is as well. And that goes back to engaging your senses. All right, so pursuing happiness. There's little things that bring you pleasure. If it is going for a run, making a salon appointment, I encourage people to have a continuum of happiness so that you have little things that are low cost, no cost that you can do kind of on the fly to help bring joy into your daily routine, but then also some of those bigger things that you can indulge in when your time and your budget and your schedule permits, right? Because, we can't go for a massage every time we're stressed, right? Or we can't go to even for a run, right? Like might be a good thing you can do a couple times a week or in the morning or in the evening. But if you're in the middle of your day and you need to, you need a little joy in your day, have those simple things too, that smell, that coffee, that a quick walk around campus, but some little things that bring you joy, and make sure you're practicing those. That goes into the next one, practicing gratitude. Gratitude can be a big self-care technique. And so, whether it is just, changing that perspective. I talked about this in one of the weeks, like having that get to mentality. So instead of I have to go pick up the kid from carpool, like I get to go pick up the kid from carpool. Instead of I have to go into work, I get to go into work. I have this job. I have people who believe in me, and I get to do this. It is something. And so what we know about gratitude is that it can decrease our anxiety. It can reduce insomnia. So just practicing gratitude journaling before you go to bed at night can help shift your perspective and reframe. Even if you have to I often tell people to take a deep breath, right? So if we were in person and I was doing this, I would likely tell you to just take a deep breath in. And then as you exhale, I would, say that air that you just breathed in, if that is the only thing you have to be thankful for in that day, that's a really good place to start. And so sometimes just practicing gratitude can help to just shift our perspective. All right, so challenging our mind. So when we cultivate our creativity or engage our senses, sometimes we need to unwind and not challenge our mind. But if we challenge our mind to try something new, can also be a good way to practice self-care. So maybe it is picking up a new hobby that has nothing to do with your day-to-day job, or that is something that is very outside of your comfort zone. Maybe you just do a daily Sudoku or a Wordle, or you do something that just challenges your mind a little. But that can help us when we're stuck. It can keep our minds sharp, and it is a way to practice self-care. All right, a couple of you mentioned this, meditation, but centering ourselves is another self-care technique. And so, whether or not you have a faith origin, but how can you center yourself? Is it practicing gratitude? Is it practicing meditation, or just a few minutes of quiet time before you start your day? Is it prayer or yoga? But what can you do to kind of center yourself and regroup, where you just have to take that deep breath in and refocus, reframe your mind, and center yourself. And all of these tips are expanded on in the publication that you will receive after today's webinar. All right, and so the last few, embracing your emotions. And so, we know that cuddling a pet, for example, can release endorphins. Laughing can release endorphins, but embracing our emotions, crying can release endorphins too. And so it may seem contradictory, but having a good cry, if that's what you need, can help you practice self-care. So sometimes we are so guarded because we are taking care of everybody else. And so many of you who said you're juggling lots of roles, parenthood, or you may be a sandwich caregiver where you're caring for an aging parent. Maybe you're caring for many employees, and you have a big a lot of personnel under you, but you're caring for everybody else, which tends to make us more guarded. And so we don't allow ourselves that time to decompress, to embrace our emotions. If we're feeling angry or sad, to let those out in very healthy ways. And, you know, while we are centering ourselves or going for a run, going for a walk, those types of things, but are we allowing ourselves to feel what it is we need to feel? And because we know that if not, sooner or later, a straw is going to break that camel's back. And that's when we tend to explode rather than to gently unpack as we go. Okay, and so in that same mindset, being body conscious, right? That means listening to your body. And we talked about this with procrastination. You know, if we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, we may not be very productive. Well, if we have emotions that we're not listening to, if we're not in tune with our body, then we're going to run ourselves down. And so are you listening to your body when it says, I am hungry? I am, you know, are you taking time in your workday to eat? I know it sounds silly, but this is a lunchtime webinar, right? And so I do a lot during a quote unquote lunch hour. So am I taking time during the day to listen to my body when I'm hungry, when I'm thirsty, when I'm tired? Am I going to bed at night? Am I at the same time, am I waking up at the same time? Am I prioritizing my sleep and my health? These are all things that we often just don't do. We push it to the wayside. And then finally, socializing. When we are trying to practice work-life balance, we can often push our socializing to the side. And so we don't make time to go out with a significant other, to go out with family or friends, to have downtime with other people. And for those of you who are busy parents, the same, you may put all of your extra energy into your children and their social lives and taxing them, that you don't take time for yourself. And we know that isolation and loneliness can contribute to just mental health challenges. And so having that time to laugh and to be with others and to be social can go a long way. So prioritizing that time. All right, so hopefully, just in hearing this, you can be inspired as some ways that you can take care of yourself, or it just serves as a gentle reminder that you need to take care of yourself, because you're not going to give your best at home or on the job if you don't. Now, in addition to personal self-care is professional self-care. And so it is important that, you know, to avoid employee burnout, that you're taking care of yourself as a professional. And there are ways to do that, right? There are ways to do that because you want to have a workplace that you enjoy going into. And you want to have a job that plays to your strengths and that challenges you. And that allows you to be successful. And those are some of those themes that we have discussed over the last few weeks together. But there are others that you can do. And the first is fueling your craft. So, you know, whatever your niche is, your profession is, are you going to conferences? Are you listening to webinars? Are you doing podcasts? Are you reading books? Are you doing continuing education? Are you doing things to become better at what it is you do? Because that is investing in your human capital. So it is an investment in who you are as a professional, and it is allowing you to be better at what you do, but also it keeps you current in your profession. It should intrigue you. It should inspire you when you are, you know, we have talked about how socialization is important, both to help us just connect with others, but it's also a way we can fuel our craft. So are you talking to others in your field? Are you, you know, bouncing ideas off of them or venting, right? But how are you becoming better at what you do? That's very important. Are you establishing clocking out routine? And so, you know, and whether you work from home, you work in the office, you do some kind of hybrid schedule. What do you do to transition your mind from when you're on the clock versus off the clock? And do you have a clocking out routine? And so for some, that is changing clothes. There's some research to support that when we change clothes after a work day, that it signals to our mind that we are off the clock. And so there is something being said to changing into pajamas or a workout outfit or something comfy. And this is true if you're at home, if you work from home. Are you changing in and out of clothes to signal the start and end of your workday? Maybe your clocking out routine is going for a run, or is listening to a certain, music mix on the car, certain music on the way home. Maybe you take a different route than you take in the morning. But what are you doing to clock out so that you can shift and, allow yourself to unwind? Do you have those boundaries? We talked about setting boundaries and prioritizing. Do you have those boundaries around your working hours? Are you answering emails all night and all weekend? And I've gotten better about, because sometimes I work on the weekends. And so this weekend was one that I worked because I was out with the kids a lot last week and I had deadlines and things that I needed to do. And so that is part of that balance, right? And so, but scheduling my email to send on those replies on a Monday morning instead of sending it on a Saturday midday, right? Because I'm trying to create boundaries around my work time, but also respecting other people's boundaries, but as a way of having a professional routine. Okay, much like we do in our personal self-care, do you recognize when you're getting stressed? So for me, if I haven't slept, I know that I am snippy. I am very snippy. And we'll talk about communication, here in just a second, but I'll communicate that to some of my colleagues. Like, I did not sleep at all last night, and so forgive me if I'm a little short today. But I recognize my stressors. I know that when I am clumsy, for example, I know me. And when I start to drop things or trip, I am not the most graceful person anyway. But I know that those are signs that I am just juggling too much. And so I try to recognize my stressors and let that cue me to when I need to rein it in, take a break, recalibrate, and those types of things. And then taking time for yourself. And so I mentioned vacation time. Some 60% of vacation time is never taken in America. So we have the vacation time, but we don't take the vacation time. And so like many of you can relate to me. So I still have things that need to get done, right? Even though I wasn't able to do them last week because of just life and home responsibilities, right? The kids. And so, but if we are never taking time for ourselves, if we're never putting up that away message, taking that vacation and not checking your email, right? Not taking text, not taking Zoom during your vacation, but actually taking time for yourself, you're going to burn out. And you need to have those boundaries. It may put you really behind when you come back. Or you may have to work really far in advance before you leave, but are you taking time for yourself? Are you completely taking time away from work, unplugging, letting colleagues know, hey, I'm going to be out of the office and I'm not going to answer my email. I'll tell my students that if it's during a time where I'm teaching and I'm going to be away for personal leave, so that again, I am setting the standard of having these boundaries and asking others to respect them. And that goes into the final tip for professional self-care is communication. Are you communicating with your teammates, with your supervisor, with your boss? Are you letting them know when you're feeling overwhelmed? Are you asking for help? Are you communicating your boundaries? Are you communicating, your work needs? Because when we don't communicate, bitterness can come in, right? And so often we expect people to read our minds, and we're not stressing when something might be on our plate. So if you're balancing a lot at home, if you are, especially if an unexpected life event has happened, are you communicating that to your colleagues, to your supervisors, so that they understand that your scales might be a little off and they can work with you, And so these are some tips, and there's not a one size fits all, but over time, can you employ any of these strategies so that you can have a better work-life balance? Okay, so, all right, so learning to juggle. If I asked you at the top of the hour, what were some of the responsibilities that you were juggling? Okay, so can you see what I'm holding here? Can you see what this is? If so, just type it in. What do I have here? Hope you can see me. A stress ball. It can be, yeah, a stress ball. It is a little rubber ball. All right, and so it is, and if I do hand these out sometimes as stress balls, but it's a rubber ball. All right, so if I were to drop this ball, what would happen? If I were to drop this rubber ball, what would happen? Gravity wins. Well, it would bounce, right? So it would bounce. All right, so what if this ball were made of glass and I dropped it? What would happen? And I realize these are rhetorical questions. It would break. Yes, thank you. Gravity will win, right? But we know that what we are dropping, though, will determine how it responds to gravity, okay? So we know that the rubber will bounce, but if it were glass, it would break. So it would break. So it's going to fall. But when we are looking at our priorities and we are learning to juggle, we have to ask ourselves, okay, of the things I'm currently juggling today, what is rubber and what is glass? Because we're all going to drop a ball, right? We are all going to. Sometimes I drop them all at once. And so part of maintaining work-life balance is asking yourself, if I were to drop this, is it rubber or is it glass? Is it going to bounce back? Because some things we know we can kind of let go. It's not the end of the world. And if we can pick it back up when we are better able to handle that task. But then there are some things that if we drop them, they will break. And so maybe that is that sick kid or that aging parent, that is that emergency phone call. Sometimes it is a work event that if we were to miss a certain appointment, it could, affect the deadline that we are working on. So that day, that might be a glass appointment. But many times, most things are rubber. But it's learning to ask yourself and decide what can I juggle and what can I not afford to break. And those are the things to prioritize. It can look different every day, and it can look different depending on the circumstance and the priority. But learning to juggle is about learning which things are going to break if you drop them, and those that aren't, can be put down. Because if we don't learn to let a ball go every now and then, we're going to drop them all. And so, because we can't juggle everything, and so as you are working on your work-life balance, and so one of the handouts that you will get after today is a worksheet where you can just kind of doodle on. What are the things I'm currently juggling? And for each of those things, labeling, okay, is this glass or rubber, right? Is this glass or rubber? Is this something that needs my full attention right now or not? All right, and so as we, wrap up our time together, I want to talk to you about what to do when you're sinking. This is especially at work. And so, but you can do this anytime, anywhere, but especially when you're thinking at work where there are just too many deadlines, you've got too much on your plate. I actually said to my husband yesterday, I think I'm at capacity. I think I may have to start saying no to projects. And just saying that out loud was pretty big self-awareness. But when you feel like you're sinking, there are 5 things that we can do, the 5 C's. And this is, again, in the publication you'll receive. The first is to calm yourself, is to take a deep breath and do one of those things that helps you recenter and clear your mind, recalibrate, and brings you just a little bit of joy. And so maybe that's going outside for a walk. Maybe that's drinking a cup of coffee, but it is taking a deep breath. In fact, I had a couple of texts come in as I was coming into the office this morning. And by the time I made it to my office from the parking lot, I was so agitated that I had to practice these 5 things this morning. But I had to take a deep breath. I drank a cup of coffee and I listened to a podcast that had nothing to do with my work or my day. And I gave myself about 10 minutes to calm down. And then I created a list. And if you've been following along, you know I love a good legal pad. But I got out my calendar and I started writing down things that I had to do. I did a brain dump of all the things that were causing me stress, for the things that needed to be accomplished. So I created a list. Then, looking at my list in my calendar, I began loosely assigning them to days. And so what needs to happen today? What can I put off till Friday? What has to happen Wednesday? But I started loosely adding items to my calendar so that I could deconstruct my tasks. I could batch my time, some of those other strategies we talked about, that I could realize that I didn't have to do it all today. That some of it I had to do today, but I could see that there was time to do the other things. Right. And so that's when I started identifying my main concerns. Okay, of those things that I put on my calendar today, how do I prioritize those? What do I need to do when? What are my main concerns, even this week? So say it's something that's not due till Friday, but it's something I really need to focus on. I'm identifying my main concerns and I'm giving myself time in my calendar to work on them. And then I start on the most critical item. And there are days where I don't have the room in my calendar to add them, right? Where there is more deadlines than there are available time slots in my day. And that's where I just have to start small, and I start somewhere. I start on the most critical. What is my next pressing deadline? And then I worry about my next pressing deadline. And I've learned that sometimes when you're thinking, it's okay to let someone know. To say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get this to you today. And I had to do that towards the end of last week. I couldn't do it all. So there was a deadline on Friday. I knew I wasn't going to meet it, but I knew the chances of that person doing something with that information on Friday was very slim, right? Nobody at the university works on Fridays, I'm convinced. And so I shot him a quick email and I said, I know you asked for this today. I am really behind. They knew I had been out with sick kids. I'm really behind. But I should be able to have it to you by Monday. I have some time Friday afternoon and I have some time over the weekend that I'm playing catch up, right? Again, I know weekend work, not always a healthy boundary. I don't make a practice of it. But in that give or take, sometimes I appreciate that I can flex my schedule like that. And they said, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to touch it until next week. Sure, no problem. And so I was causing myself stress when I didn't need to. I admitted that I was thinking. And again, this can't be your rule, right? If this is your exception, it's okay to say, hey, I'm human and I'm doing the best I can to balance. And so when we are thinking, it is these 5 things I think can help you calm yourself and prioritize, that you just focus on the task at hand and then you move to the next task, right? That we don't allow ourselves to become overwhelmed by looking at it all at once. All right, so that is it for the productivity series for time well spent. And I'm happy to open it up for any questions or comments that you have, maybe tips that you have for practicing self-care, either at work or on the job. And Jamie has posted the link into the text chat as well. And so while we're fielding questions or after the webinar, I'd appreciate it if you would just leave us your feedback on the curriculum, on this session. That would be appreciated. But any questions or comments about things that you do when you're syncing, tips for self-care, areas that are hard for you to balance